Today's guest blew me away. Robyn has got an incredible work ethic. At 12 years old, she knew that she wanted to be in events. Since then, she's gone on to build 3 hugely successful businesses. That's everything from festivals through to travel companies. She's ran multi-million-pound parties for the likes of Formula One. She also started the UK's first ever socially distanced festival. Robyn is honest, she's passionate about her craft, she's got an incredibly inspiring story that I can't wait to share with you. So thank you to Robyn for coming on and sharing all of those learnings that she's made along the way, and I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. We're back. We've got a new series of Business Keeps on Dancing, and this series we're going to focus on spotlights of some of our favourite people and some of the most successful people in the music industry and find out how they did it. So today we've got Robyn Isherwood. Is that the right pronunciation?
It is the right pronunciation.
Yes. Robyn's the founder of the UK's first ever social distancing festival, which was Gisborne Park Pop-Up. And then since then she's gone on to launch the Estate Festival. But if she wasn't busy enough, she's also got a travel and event concierge company called Encore Lifestyle, and Robyn's got more than 12 years experience with some of London's largest well-renowned event companies, and she's worked all over the world, from music events to the luxury event sector. You've had multi-million-pound parties from what I've heard, so I'm sure you've got some stories to tell us there. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's an absolute pleasure.
How are you doing?
Nice to be back in the north.
Yeah.
Nice to be back in Manchester. I haven't been in Manchester for a long time, so
it's actually a sunny day in Manchester.
I know, yeah.
As well.
I was like skipping down the streets. I was like, this is lovely.
You've brought the sunshine with you. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. I think your journey is quite interesting because, you know, some people kind of go straight into the festival scene, but you've kind of gone a bit more large scale with it to begin with. But yeah, I want to hear that in your words. So where did you start your first foray into events? Where did it start?
Sure. I mean, I knew I wanted to do events from the age of 12, which is, and I was desperate to work from 12. I begged and begged and begged my mother to have a job, and she was like, "You're 12." And so we applied for the local cafe, and they were like, "No, you're too young." But then somebody didn't turn up for work, and then I got the call, so I started working. And I just loved the hospitality industry from that point, and just kind of being with people and a kind of a personable kind of role. And then from there, I knew I wanted to do the event side of things, so started planning the proms. So I planned my high school prom and my sixth form prom, and then worked for a wedding venue locally in Clitheroe. And again, just started to see all of that kind of side of things with the events, and so many different elements to how a wedding would work. And then I don't know if you remember, probably not, there was an event in the north called Loaded New Year's Eve party, and it was at the Duncan Hulsh Hotel, and it was like the full hotel takeover New Year's Eve party. Each different room was a different theme, and it was all, you could have stayovers, there was a pool party. And I met Jamie, who was the owner and kind of curator of that whole event, and I basically interned for him, and I got free tickets off the back of it. And from that, I was like, right, this is what I want to do. So when it came to choosing the university that I wanted to go to, my sixth form were very kind of certain that I should go to a red brick university and do business management. And I was like, that's great, but I don't want to do that. I want to do events. It was, well, you could do business and then transfer across to events. And I was like, but what's the point? I don't get it. And I was academic to a point. I did well in my A levels, but I wasn't a kind of a bookworm. I was way more get me in front of people, working, and that side of things. So then Mum looked into different places where you could do it, and obviously there was Leeds, Manchester, and Oxford Brookes. So I ended up going to Oxford Brookes University and studied international hospitality management, which is a 4-year course. And on my second year of the course, I had to do a placement year. And being international hospitality management, I had the opportunity of either doing an international element of my placement or an international exchange. And I knew that I wanted to be in London to do events, so I figured to use the international placement, not the placement, sorry, the exchange as the international part of the course, and focus my placement in London. So I managed to get the placement at the Amable Crichton, which at the time was kind of like the biggest events company in London, run by Johnny Roxburgh, who is just the best human being. And he taught me everything, and he will, if he ever watches this, he will like to agree with that. But he was amazing, and just so just inspiring, just the way that he changed a room and did the things that he did. And so my first ever event, I got the placement, and I wasn't meant to start until September, and then I got called by the staffing manager and, what are you doing in the next 3 days? Nothing. It was the summer holidays, so nothing. Do you want to come to Tuscany? It's like, yes, I do.
Yeah.
So flew out to Tuscany, and we did a £3.5 million wedding, and that was my first event for them. They built the marquee above the tennis courts in a chateau. There was a team of florists that they brought out from London who were replanting the entire castle to match the theme of the wedding.
Wow.
And it was the biggest eye-opener for me to kind of, come from Clitheroe and done my little events here, there and everywhere, and then to be thrust into a very kind of London-style planning of an event, and of that budget. It was just like, But from that moment, I knew I was in the right industry, because it was just so exciting, and there were so many elements to it that had to be right. I mean, there was 4-tiered hanging chandeliers of flowers in the ceiling of the marquee, and just insane. And then from there, I worked. The placement was amazing because it was a structured placement within the business. So I had to work in every single section of the business. So I was even a porter. So they had the storerooms with all the props and the plates and the cutlery, because it was actually a catering company as well as a design company. So all of the big South African porters, I only lasted a week. They were like, Robyn, all you can carry is cushions. And I was like, I'm sorry. It's like, but I can make a good tea. And then I was in the kitchen, and then I finally got into the party planning office. And that's kind of where I flourished. And I was then made an assistant of one of the senior party planners, and working directly with him on a huge bar mitzvah. It was a James Bond themed bar mitzvah. And we rigged the bar mitzvah boy in a harness to the ceiling of the marquee.
Right.
And so all of the guests went in and sat down. It was all personalised tabletops on the tables that were like roulette designs, but personalised with his name and everything. And then everyone sat down, and all the lights flickered. And then we had who's the really evil one from James Bond? That's like Dr. Evil. Yeah, Dr. Evil came on stage, and it was like, ha ha ha, the only person that can save you now is James Bond. So the 11-year-old bar mitzvah boy then flies through the ceiling of the marquee over all of his guests in his tuxedo to a 16-piece orchestra playing James Bond.
How did you get that past health and safety?
I'm not actually entirely sure we did. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, did I see an event management plan? And then he threw some fake grenades on the stage, and we did fake pyros. And then there were these 2 blonde Bond girls that like undid his harness, and then passed him a fake martini. And he span round and said, "Shaken, not stirred." And like one of those moments, you're just like, right.
This is what I'm going to do forever.
This is really pushing it. But it was amazing. And so off the back of that, for a year, I actually won an award for the best placement in the UK, which was huge for me and for my career. So when I went back to university for 2 more years, did a exchange to Australia. So I went to university for Australia for a semester. And then I ended up with 14 job offers off the back of it. Off the back of this award, because it was so kind of well known, and I think because of the amount of events that I'd done and what I'd seen, my CV was fairly strong in terms of graduating. So from there, I was going to go back to the Admirable Crichton, but GSP counter-offered, and I was hired to be the assistant producer of the Formula One after parties around the world, which was a major job straight out of university. We started working on there was an Australia one and a Malaysia Grand Prix. Then unfortunately things kind of fell apart with the other side of the F1 bits, but that's a long story. But I was kept on at GSP, and for 2.5 years travelled the world from Ibiza to Puglia, Cannes, Saint-Tropez, everywhere, doing multi-million-pound parties. I did a £2 million wedding on an island in Cannes and had to barge load everything across. We flew the flowers in, we trucked the production in, the furniture in, all around. Like, it was just insane.
Wow. So you really started with a bang.
With a bang.
Yeah. I think I kind of went the other end from like flyering and doing nights on shoestring budgets and then kind of built up there. But I guess you've kind of gone in at the deep end and just tried to absorb all of that. The thing I find really interesting is that you've got, you know, any promoter, agent, booker, anyone started off as a novice and not really knowing what they're doing. And I think I find it really interesting, that process of when you're first starting off, and I think you touched on it then, trying bits of everything is the best education you can get. And I think just being on the front line of having to book it and do flowers and get kids flying across rooms and all of that, it's so important to understand the whole 360 of how an event works.
100%.
So how did you find that?
I think that was one of the biggest learning curves of my placement, and that's kind of why I do owe a lot to Johnny and everybody at the Amable Crichton, because, you know, mistakes were made at that, and I was young, but you only make the mistake once, and that's like the key thing in the events industry. Is I think everyone's open to people making a mistake if they don't know, but it's how you then react to it and then work on from it. So I remember at that bar mitzvah, I was in charge of the plasmon, which is, you know, when you walk in, you have your name card and then it tells you what table you're sat at. And then also on the table, then there was the name card. And so I had them all in the office, and I had all the boxes, all that, but I didn't check them against the guest list. And that was, for me. So then when I was on the event doing the setup and laying everything out, I hadn't checked them, so there was missing and there were spelling mistakes. But it was too late to then get the calligrapher to then redo them. And it's tiny little details like that. Now I'm so anal when I get my printing in before an event to check everything. Because you've got time to be able to change it, and you know it's human error. The calligraphy, just miss one name from a list of 250 names, like it's not a big deal. But at that moment, it was a pretty big deal because I think it was the mother's name as well. I was like,
wow,
but
that's where you learn to sweat the small stuff, because I think there's finding a balance between just get started, get perfect later, and just get stuck in. But I think the more you expose yourself to making mistakes, as horrible and as anxiety-inducing as it sounds, like that is what you learn from. Like 100%. I'm sure everyone has fucked up and learned a lot from it. And you kind of need to put yourself in those positions.
And exactly, you've got to look at the entire thing of a £1 million party, and you've not got one name card in the grand scheme of things. Of everything else that's gone well and perfect, it's okay. But at the time when you feel like that's the end of the world, and it's like you're not saving lives. You're just putting a name card on a table.
Sometimes if I
find someone with good handwriting.
If I have a really long or stressful week, I'm like, do you know what, people have got much bigger things to worry about than selling tickets. But so I find it interesting, like your transition, which we'll get to later, in terms of how your career's progressed from there. But was there a point when you were doing these parties for other people, working with big teams and thinking, I want to do this on my own? Was that always an ambition of yours?
Yeah, definitely. And actually, so when I left GSP, I then went to I did a small stint at Made Up and actually went into the production world, because I'd done 3 back-to-back abroad weddings in Italy, and I was like, I do not want to see another private event ever. I am done with brides. I can't do it. No. So I went into production and went to Made Up, and obviously they do all the set design and production for all the clubs in Ibiza and all the festivals, and very brand orientated.
Yeah.
And so I was bringing a little bit more of a kind of private events edge to that. I was only there for 6 months because I was then poached by Lillingston, which is another big private events company. And I remember in the interview, Sophie Lillingston asked me, what's your 5-year plan? I said, I'll have my own business in 5 years. She said, that's very, you're quite young, and that's very ambitious. And I was like, well, actually, it'll probably be 3. Yeah. And she looked at me like, right, you're not joking. And I wasn't. In 5 years, I have my own business. So I got the job at Lillingston. Again, more private, amazing parties, weddings around the world. And then we developed the concierge side of things, which was essentially we had super high net worth clients that were spending a lot of money on parties and weddings. And it's a 12-month process where you become part of their family. You are in their house every week. You are on the phone, WhatsApp, calls, changing flower designs, doing this, and you become kind of so involved in them because it's such a big day for them or weekend, but then when it finishes, it's like a breakup because there is no reason for you to stay in touch with them. But they have, you know, a net worth which they trust you. If they trust you enough to do your wedding, then surely they'll trust you to go on a travel trip or take them to the F1 or to the Champions League final. And so then I then developed the concierge element with a private events edge to it. Instead of it kind of being corporate hospitality, it was really high end. So it was a private jet into, you know, for the Champions League with a box and security and restaurant bookings and 5-star hotels and all of that sort of stuff. And at the same time doing the private events, but kind of keeping those clients within the business. And then I was actually given my own company within Lillingston. So I was then director shareholder of the concierge company. That then blew up and was amazing. We then bought a travel company and an American travel company. So then we had this kind of the Lillingston collection, which was the triangle of private events, travel and concierge. And we were feeding each other because the events team were doing abroad events. And so when you were doing an abroad event, you had 250 people going to Italy. We then put on the invitations, speak to our travel company to then organise all your travel. Okay. And then, so we were feeding the business, and it was a really lovely kind of triangle of situations. But then I got to the point where time was up.
Was there a day you woke up and thought, like, what was that moment when you actually started it yourself?
I think it was after a very, very intensely hard year, which, you know, I'll speak quite openly about. I pressured myself and the business. There was a lot of pressure from the business, and that's when my anxiety started. Yeah. And I was on and off. I did about 20 abroad trips, and I was on and off a plane. I was literally coming home, flipping a suitcase, repacking, leaving the next day, while still having to do the work and run the business and deal with the clients. And the clients' needs were getting bigger, and I was turning over, you know, in excess of 4 million. And it was so intense, and it was kind of, I felt like my brain was going to explode, and I was really, really battling hard with severe anxiety at the time, because I felt like I was failing. I felt like, wait, I've always been able to do this. I've always been able to do the long hours, that like the through the night working to kind of get your deadline in for the next day, and I was slowly but surely, I was getting weaker and weaker, and then the anxiety was getting worse, the attacks were getting worse, and I was really struggling and balancing everything. And it wasn't so much a point at that point that I was like, I'm going to do this for myself. It was actually more of I've got to stop this for my health. Yeah, I need some time out, and I had to leave because of, you know, situations and things. And so I did. I left. I went traveling for a month. They gave me a sabbatical just to kind of like reset, which was important. And then on that sabbatical, it was so clear. I was like, I can't go back into this in this scenario and situation. And then I left and had to kind of take some time out to just really kind of bring myself back around. Had some great life coaching, dealt with all the anxiety, spoke to all my friends quite openly about it at that point, because I wasn't then embarrassed about it. I was able to talk about it, and I was actually fighting it. And then from that point, I was like, okay, I think I'm ready now. I'm going to take it slow. I'm going to have my own consultancy business and just see what comes. I didn't have a website, didn't have an Instagram. It was just, you know, word of mouth. And then things were really picking up again, and I felt like I was back in my stride, and I was like, right, I'm ready to go. Got to the beginning of 2020. With some incredible projects that I was working on for the year, and I was like, right, I'm back. This is so exciting. And then, boom, the pandemic. I was like, interesting. And I remember I went to Cheltenham. I actually think I got COVID at Cheltenham, because I then had COVID after that. But on that day, I remember just looking around, and everyone was nervous, and there was just this weird vibe in like the events industry, and
that was like one of the last big
it was
events.
And I was kind of looking around, and I was like, how is this actually happening? Yeah. You know, if countries are shutting down and we're having an event, and I remember just looking around and just thinking, this isn't going to be good. and this isn't going to be good for our industry. And then on that day, I had a 25th birthday for a client in London, and they pulled it. It was all paid for. It was in a week's time. And they were like, no, even if we can have this, it's socially not right for us as a family to be throwing this party, because if somebody gets COVID at this event, we don't want to be in the press for that. Like, you know, private family throw party and super spreading event to 200 people. So we cancelled it. And I remember just sitting at home and thinking, well, one, I thought I was depressed, but I actually just had COVID, and I just felt awful. And I slept for 3 days solid. But two, I was kind of like, this isn't going to bounce back. This isn't going to be because everyone in the industry at the time, so this was March, and we postponed that event in March to September. It's just going to be the summer. Then everything will be back. Everything will be normal come September. No worries about it. And I remember being like, okay. And I have my own flat in London, but it's tiny weeny. And then the lockdown kind of was pending. So I packed a bag for a month and moved back home to the north with mum and dad. And I was like, I'll just go for a month. A year later, I came back to London.
Wow.
And it was the weirdest time for me. I honestly think I'll always look back on that time as a time that our generation went through a war. Like, it was almost like that was our war, where you had to stay home and there was no communication, there was no work, and there was no my fast-paced life that I'd lived for 12 years stopped.
Yeah.
My phone stopped. My clients didn't contact me. I wasn't on the end of a WhatsApp 100% of the time. And I did not know what to do with myself. My poor parents, I drove them insane. I literally was like, right, today we're going to reorganise the garden. Today we're going to, I renovated the whole house. And they were like, will you stop? I was like, I can't sit still.
Everyone had pristine gardens,
yeah, exactly.
The best DIY.
I literally was like, I've just got to do something, because there wasn't even anything that I could be working on, because there was no sign of it ever coming back anytime soon. And this September date that kind of everyone in the industry had as like, as if like this was just going to go, everyone's just going to have a summer and then it was going to go away and then life will resume in September. And it just didn't go away. And at the time I was director of weddings at Gizon Park. So again, we were dealing with every single cancellation. I was doing that on a consultancy basis. So I'd rebranded and repositioned the whole of the weddings at Gizon Park and cancelled all the weddings, having to deal with very, very, very upset bride and grooms who they were just devastated. And again, we moved some of those to September thinking, well, we'll be fine. And some of the weddings, actually, we ended up moving 3 times, which is just so emotionally draining for the couples to kind of go through that. It's happening. No, it's not happening. It's happening. No, it's not happening. And it was so hard to kind of give advice to these couples when I was talking utter shit, to be honest.
Just had to put a brave face on every day.
And be like, no, it's going to be great. Everything's going to be fine. Thinking, I know damn fine this isn't going to be fine. But if it is fine, then we need to ensure that they've got a date. Because also then there was the panic book of weddings from people that had just got engaged that hadn't yet got a venue. So they were like, oh my gosh, we need a date. So that was a whole thing.
Were there any days, and I actually think most people in the events industry must have thought this at least one day, when you thought of just quitting events altogether because it was so unclear whether it was coming back. You kind of realised the crazy lifestyle that you do have to live to run events. So did you have a day when you thought this is it, I'm going to do something else?
I actually being home, I hadn't been home more than like a long weekend or Christmas since I was 18. And I'd lived on my own for 4 years in my flat. And so to actually then move back into my bedroom with my parents, like it was a real shift of dynamic for all of us to have to kind of be living in each other's presence as adults. But then I kind of was almost convincing myself that this country lifestyle and living back at home, actually I could do this. Yeah, this is kind of, and it was a weird kind of convincing of, maybe I need a slower paced life. Maybe this is good for me. Actually, like I do feel better without the kind of stress and the pressure and everything else. And I remember mum and dad, and I kind of like talking to them about it, and they were like, categorically, you are not moving back home after everything you have done in your career to be where you are and have your house in London and your network in London. Like, you're not just handing this in. Like, there's no way. And I was like, oh, I thought you'd be quite happy about me coming home. They're like, no. And then that's kind of where the idea and the development of Gisborne Park pop-up came from. Yeah. And it all started because my dad, he bought a line marking robot before lockdown.
A what?
Yeah. A line marking robot.
So what does that do?
So my dad does pitches and kind of turf care, and he's a line marker, but standard old school line marking of pitches that you spend 4 hours on a football pitch with, string measurements and make sure it's all straight and everything else. And so just before the pandemic, he bought a little robot that is all done on GPRS, and you fill it with paint, and you've got 150 different templates. You can even do a Quidditch pitch if you wanted to. And basically you locate your pitch from this iPad that's connected to it, and you press go, and off it goes and paints it perfectly straight and perfectly. Anyway, obviously the worst time to buy a robot that does that when nobody's doing sport. So Dad runs he runs Clitheroe Rugby Club. And which also I laugh at now, I'm like, do you remember the time when we were only allowed out an hour a day?
So mad.
Wild. So Dad disappeared for more than an hour, I will be honest. And me and Mum were like, where has he gone? He called me and was like, oh, come down to the rugby club. I want to show you something. So I went down to the rugby club, and he'd written on the pitch using his trusty little robot we call Ollie, Optimus Line, OLI. It was a big family discussion about what was the name of the robot. And he'd written a whole message to the NHS, because you could do lettering. Yeah. And it said, thank you to the NHS from CRUFC. And I was like, this is insane. So I got one of my friends to then drone shot the actual message, and I took a load of videos of Ollie kind of doing his thing, edited a little video for him, and then took over his social media, because once again I had nothing else to do.
Had to do something to focus.
My dad's pitch care Instagram and Twitter was popping. Me learning all these terminologies, and all of his friends were like, who's running your social media? It was like, my daughter. That is what she's doing, and we pay her in wine and food.
A good deal. Yeah. A good deal.
But this video, we launched the video on Clap for Heroes, and it went viral.
Wow.
And then Manchester United got in touch and Liverpool got in touch to then, I did on the YN, You'll Never Stand Alone, the NHS logo. That was me and my dad.
Wow.
So they got in touch to then do this NHS logo in the middle of the pitches. And again, that was at the time that you could only be with your family members. Yeah. So I'd gone from travelling the world, planning £1 million parties, to being my dad's peg girl in the middle of Manchester United and Liverpool pitch, pegging out where he had to send off his blooming robot to write the NHS logo. And I remember standing there, and we were the only people in Old Trafford and the only people at Anfield, which was incredible. And I was like, how has my life changed? I was dealing with different paint nozzles and but then I then started doing my dad's website and learning about this robot and all the different functions and templates. And one of the templates was a car park template. So you could press go, and off it went and painted a grid formation. And then my very clear mind at the time started kind of going off the back of that and thinking, right, well, if you could paint a grid, then surely there's a design that I could come up with that people could then be in the pod in the grid. Then you're a bubble of 6 at the time, so then hexagons, 6-sided hexagon. My brother's an architect and a set designer, so I made him design this kind of hexagon grid formation, which was almost like a honeycomb.
Yeah.
But each edge of the hexagon was 2 meters distance, and each hexagon was then placed 2 meters apart at every point. So with 6 people in a hexagon, you and everyone on the corners, you were technically still socially distanced. Yeah. And then you were then socially distanced from your next pod next to you, because that was 2 meters away. And then where we do the weddings at Gisborne, there's a beautiful valley. And so I kind of dropped it on a floor plan. And me and my brother were just playing around with some designs, and then it kind of came around. We were do you remember it was beautiful weather, insanely beautiful weather. So we're like, maybe we could do some sort of bar on the river or something. then I spoke to Matty Evans. Do you know Matty from NTRP?
Yep.
So he's a really good friend of mine. And I called him. I was like, right, I've got this wild idea. So I've come up with this like grid formation, and that everything will be table service, and basically do like a big stage. Do you reckon any of the DJs that you do your touring for would come and DJ? And he was like, well, there's no harm in asking.
Got nothing else to do.
Yeah. So then all of a sudden I had Jonas Blue, Sam Divine, Shapeshifters, Hot Since 82. There was like 5 that confirmed straight off the bat. And I was like, right, these people are coming to Gisborne in the middle of nowhere, and I'm now doing an event for them. I was like, shit, what have I done? And then we started kind of developing it, and then we launched it. I mean, it was 3 weeks from concept to launch.
What?
Yeah,
that is insane.
It is. I know. I realised
you had
that
a lot
now.
of time to.
Yeah, there was a lot of time.
It, yeah.
But that was also like marketing. People also thinking, you know, what is this event? We're in a pandemic. How, you know, I'm not going to go to it. And then the press hit. And I remember the morning vividly when the headline came out, the UK's first social distance festival. And I was like, fuck, I'm doing a festival. I didn't mean to do a festival. I was like, oh God, this was just meant to be like a bar on the river and with some, you know, nice music, and oh no. And then it was 260 headlines globally. We were in the New York Times, we were in China, Australia, everything. And then we had that first weekend. And actually, we started the build, and we didn't actually have confirmation from Boris at the time that you could actually have live performance.
You had to take the risk anyway.
There was a lot of risk that went on, and yeah, so Boris gave the go ahead on live entertainment in a socially distanced venue 24 hours before our first day.
Wow!
I was like, thank you.
But then you kind of have to read and digest that guidance and work out kind of what applies to the site as well. In 24 hours.
In 24 hours, and it was constantly changing, and once we launched, I mean, the first weekend was very quiet. It was very much kind of friends and family, and you know, because people didn't believe it was happening. So a lot of people, our biggest thing on social media was, oh, is this the new Fire Festival?
Yeah, and
everybody thought it was a scam because who is managing to do a festival when festivals aren't allowed to happen and it's a pandemic? Yoo-hoo. Nice to meet you. The crazy person. And then when people started to see the content on social media, and we had Oscar, who's one of my best friends now, he was a genius in turning content around. So even on the weekend, so we had a build video released, and then the first event was released immediately, so people could actually see it was, oh my, this is actually happening.
Yeah.
And that's where the snowball kind of came from in terms of the press, because there was no other press out there. There was nothing to write about or talk about. So that's why it kind of went so quickly. So then by the second weekend, we were 70% full. But we were doing 8 events a week. So Wednesday night was cinema night. Wednesday daytime we had a family show. So it was like Disney sing-along, and it was great. It was very wholesome. But I mean, 12 weeks in, and we did that twice a week. I was pretty much done with Baby Shark.
Let It Go is ringing around your ear.
It was Baby Shark. Every time Baby Shark, I was like, no, please, no. So that was Wednesday. Wednesday night was film night. Thursday night was cinema night as well. Friday daytime we did kind of like a proms in the park. So it was like live music, jazz singers, pianists, and we did that for kind of the older crowd, which actually it wasn't very busy because we hadn't appreciated that the older crowd were definitely not going to leave their house. Like they were very nervous. Friday night was then entertainment evening, so we had Ibiza Orchestra, Symphonic Ibiza. We had a Greatest Showman evening, Queen tribute.
Are you programming, like, what's the team at this point? Are you programming the whole thing?
Yeah.
And running it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
One woman band.
So I had 3 other business partners. Will was doing the website, and then Guy just owned the estate. But yes, it was very much kind of, we were a very small team, and it was a lot of late nights because not only were we focusing on like the first weekend to launch, it was meant to only be for a month. Yeah. So we were kind of going ahead and programming and selling and marketing and dealing with ticket revenue. So for me, going from private events where your client just pays your bill 100% upfront before you even step foot onto a venue, I was playing I was going backwards from, I need the money in from revenue for an event that hasn't even started or doesn't exist and nobody even believes in. Yeah. So I personally invested quite a lot to kind of get it off the ground. And
so that's a big change, starting from huge scale corporate events, as you say, the people are going to be there. You just need to make sure it's an amazing experience.
Yeah.
Flipping that on its head to then festivals and events, which is very much B2C, and selling tickets is no mean feat. But then also, it's almost like you've, in what was a crisis for so many people, you've actually found an opportunity in that, and despite all the odds, actually started a festival in the middle of a pandemic, and not just one festival. How many was it a week?
8 events a week for 12 weeks.
For 12 weeks, okay. Well, go hard or go home, as they say.
I remember on the first, when Hot Since 82 turned up, and his tour manager came up to me and said, hi, who's the promoter? I said, oh, actually, we do our own promoting. It's all like in-house. I didn't know what the terminology of promoter was.
Yeah.
Because I'm an event producer in the private events world. You don't call yourself a promoter because you're not selling. And so I was like spieling off all this like, oh no, we actually do our own like marketing and stuff. And he was like, no, like the promoter. And I was like, I think you might be meaning me. I'm the director. And he was like, right. I was like, I'm Robyn. Oh yeah, you're the promoter. I was like, good to know I'm now the promoter. Great.
Another hat to put on.
I was like, okay. And then every week, when we had everyone like Salado and everyone was like, oh yeah, who's the promoter? I'm like, me. That would be me. I get it now. I am a promoter. And I remember Matty as well being like, Rob's, have you got your accreditation sorted? I was like, okay. I was like, what's accreditation? He was like, you are joking me. I was like, this is the day before we launched.
Wow.
And I was like,
literally done it the other way around.
Yeah.
It's
and
so
I was like, I
crazy.
don't know what you're talking about. It's like AAAs, production passes, staff passes. I was like,
Okay.
Do we need to order them?
The day before.
Yeah. So literally went to the local printers, had them all laminated, had them on like lanyards, and I was like, now we have accreditation, people. Like it was like the running joke of the summer. Has everybody got their accreditation? It's like, and he was like, you need AAA escort. I was like, that is racy. I was
So
like,
who's guiding you through all of this then?
Matty was amazing. He jumped in because obviously normally he is all around the world with Jonas Blue and Swedish House Mafia and dealing with like big things, and then all of a sudden he finds himself in Gisborne. Dealing with a 350 cap festival that's socially distanced. But he was amazing because I ran it like a private event, and so it was very kind of high end in the fact that you put up a flag and the staff member walked over, and it was gourmet food, and I think that's why it worked. But then he ran the kind of the crux, and so he knew all about the COVID rules, so that the stage, how many people were on stage, the in between DJ switchovers, the whole DJ decks had to be sanitized, so the music had to come down. All of those things that he was incredible in guiding and mentoring. And I mean, there were some heated moments between the two of us because we sometimes clashed in like, I was like, no, it needs to be. And he was like, Robyn, okay, I'll stick with my accreditation.
Compromise and meet in the middle.
But it was kind of a baptism of fire because not only was I dealing with on-site, so I was on-site for every single event throughout the whole series. I was then dealing with the programming, the suppliers, the invoicing, everything, and it was too much to take on. And we made mistakes. We did not make money in the summer, and it was a huge. We were only meant to do it for a month, and then there was the Lancashire lockdown. So nothing else was open apart from us. So I was like, well, we've now got momentum. We're now selling out every weekend, so we'll extend another month. So that was into August. And then by that point, we were sell out every Saturday, and we had Sonny Fodera, Salado. I mean, we had like the biggest DJs, Eats Everything, the whole lot. And I remember just being like, this is mental that this is all happening. One, it's my event, and two, in Gisborne, like in a tiny little town.
Did that feel like a risk going into something, one that you didn't really know, but I feel like you've gone from an industry you've been so successful in with, and then when you kind of it's fair to say most events probably don't make money in the first year or the first few months. So what was making you stick with events at that point? Because it sounds stressful. You've got to learn all this new stuff.
Yeah.
Why stick with it?
I think I was just determined not to be kind of boxed into this, the events industry is dead. I was like, that I don't take well to being told no. And I was like, if I can find out a way to make it work, that yes, we didn't make money, but my God, I provided jobs. I had security, I had chefs, I had waiting staff, I had production teams that were stacking shelves in Tesco, and they, I had one of the best lighting designers that usually is on tour with like the biggest artists, and he was at Gisborne. And so the team that we had was like the rock star team in the industry, who without that event would have probably left the industry.
Yeah.
Because no one was earning money. And also just, it was when we kind of went into it, the joy and the feedback that we were getting drove us to do more, because it was like the first time. Sometimes like you could see like friends joining for the first time that they'd seen each other, and it was quite an emotional kind of like, oh my God, we're out.
Yeah.
And it was hard work. I mean, it was like I'd basically painted a magic line on the floor, and everybody had to stay within their hexagon. And we had a saying, and it was a bit of a saying, that it was stay in your fucking hexagon. And it was a 3-strike rule. And if you were told once, it was kind of like, guys, you need to stay in your hexagon. If you were told twice, you were then put on a final warning. Third time, you were out. And I was very happy to throw people out, because I was kind of like, if you're willing to pay a ticket, which is quite expensive, and then break the rules, which will then jeopardize my license and this entire event happening, get out, get away from my event. I don't want you here, because you aren't respecting that this is the only thing that's happening in the UK. So go. So the first few weeks, people kind of tested it. But then after that, it was kind of like, if you want to be here, just be here and do the rules. And they did. So, yeah, I mean, that was fun, just telling people constantly, stay in hexagon. I was like, I mean, it's literally like a man. And actually on the kids shows, Mary Poppins came onto stage at the start of every kids show and explained to the kids that it was a magical line, because the kids were harder, like they were 10 times harder to deal with than the adults, because they were just like ping, 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 ping. And I was like, so we made it a magical line that you couldn't step over, and all these kids were like, oh.
The floor is lava outside of the hexagon.
Damn it, I should have used that one. Damn, that would have been great. So yeah, so then summer ended up being 12 weeks, and then after it was kind of, then the cleanup of all the invoices that kind of came in and stuff, and then it was the realization of, wow, like we didn't make money and I owed people money. So then this, like the anxiety of the high of kind of running the event and all the press and everything else, and everybody thinking that it was the biggest success, and it was the biggest success because we managed to do it, but financially it wasn't. And so then I had to kind of really kind of dig deep and figure out, like, how am I going to get myself out of this? We're still in a pandemic. So then I just had to start being creative. So
and this is all on your shoulders, all kind of, lots to think about.
Lot to think about. So then I came up with a drive-in fireworks night.
Yeah.
So literally 350 cars drove in, and we set off fireworks in the field in front of them. And we had the local radio station do like the whole radio station for that night there, and we had everyone beeping with like music. So the radio was like pumped into everyone's cars, so everyone could hear the music.
Oh, cool.
So we did that, and then for Christmas, I launched Social Distanced Santa's Grotto, Social Distanced Christmas Market. It was all one-way systems and so complicated. And then a drive-in pantomime, which kudos to Pop-Up Entertainment and their incredible cast. They did 12 pantomimes on an open stage in the north in December. One of the days it snowed, and they were in costume, and they absolutely smashed the pants off it. And I'm surprised that none of them got pneumonia. I was like layered up, like literally like coat, like everything, hat, wellies, and they're in like a little like prancing around outfit. And I was like, how are you alive? Like, how are you okay?
Oh my God.
And then we did Maybank Holiday Weekender this year. And after that, we kind of cleared the decks with what we owed everybody, and we'd pulled it back. And it was a kind of, I was exhausted by the end of it, but it was one of the most, I think it was probably the biggest achievement of my entire life to kind of do that whole thing. but also just kind of understanding from a very different side of the world that I worked in with kind of the money and the private event stuff, like how hard it is in the festival world to, one, make money, and to manage every element, because if your sales aren't there, you've still got your infrastructure. And that very fine line of not getting it quite right, and then literally everything is there. And that's actually what happened with my second festival that I launched.
So yeah, that was my next question. So you've gone through all of the trials and tribulations of going into festivals, but then doing that socially distanced, which brings its own challenges. What's next? What are you thinking? Like, are you wanting to stick at this? Are you thinking I want to change it up a bit? Shall I just wait till things come back to normal?
Most people would be like, never again. Me, let's launch another one.
Yeah, okay. What was
So
that one?
I launched a second festival called the Estate Festival with two incredible business partners, Josh and Sam. So Sam used to be the head of marketing for Defected and social media. So he'd kind of guided me, and he'd helped out massively with my marketing techniques for Gisborne. So he kind of told me how to do things and how to drive sales if sales weren't there, and tactics of, you know, almost like gaslighting slightly and stuff like that, which was again a whole new world for me. I'd never sent a mailer out, so he taught me how to like do the mailing thing.
And is this you doing it every day? Did you have a team around you?
I had Sarah, who worked for me at the time, doing the socials, but it was basically
Wow.
So that was a whole new, like, you know, the hidden adverts, didn't even know you could do that. How clever. Now I'm like
actually
a social
target
media
all these
whiz.
people.
I know, wild.
The dark arts of social media.
I mean, we went through the first month and a half, and then when I started speaking to Sam about it, he was like, "Oh, can I look into your Facebook business manager page?" We didn't even have it set up, so we weren't even tracking all of the data. We didn't have Google Pixels. We didn't have any of that background stuff. And he was like, "What?" It's like, right, we need to set this up quick. So then, and then Josh, my other business partner, I've worked with for 7 years, and he's got one of the most incredible catering companies in London, Opus 11. So then we kind of got our heads, and actually Josh and his partner Charlie came to the north for the whole of the series and worked for me, and we all had a staff house and lived there. So I had quite a lot of people from London that came up, who were major in the events industry, to kind of help out. And so then we put our heads together, and the biggest thing that came out of Gisborne was that the feedback was that people wanted the concept to stay, because essentially it was table service at a festival. So each hexagon had its own furniture, and there was a VIP section at the front, which was all sofas, and the table service was bottle service. So bottles of vodka, champagne. And so you had your own area. No one was pushing you. No one was coming near you. And you were watching your favourite DJ right in front of you. So our kind of audience capture was 25 to 45, 55. We've skipped the 18 to 25. One, we almost like outpriced them. And two, like it wasn't for them. It was for the older kind of generation that want something a bit nicer, but still want to have a party. And so we kind of got our heads thinking around it, and then came up with the Estate Festival, which the idea of the Estate Festival was this year was to launch in the pandemic, because again, you know, you've got the minority. So, sorry, you'll have the monopoly. And so we did, and it was going to run for 4 weeks. It was a bigger cap, so it was 650 cap. We built a glamping village for 70 people. I built a swimming pool, which nearly killed me, with a bar at the like a swim up to bar in the glamping village. We had a restaurant on the river, and then a huge stage set up. And again, it was more of a kind of weekend thing. So you'd come for the whole weekend, you'd do the glamping, you'd go to the restaurant for your breakfast. We then did after parties in the restaurant, and anyone that was staying or VIP could then go there. And it was just to kind of like level up. But the idea of it was, and still is that we got the reputation and we built the crowd in the south, that we would then, outside of the pandemic, which is what we're working on now, is to then will be the first VIP festival, basically. So it will, the concept will remain the same. There will be VIP areas at the front of the stage. There will be a small dance floor that we're going to add into areas, so then there is areas to dance, but essentially it's going to be a table service festival.
Great.
And it works. Like, people,
attention to detail, just listening to you describe it is insane. But
Yeah.
that's what you've come from.
And that's the difference. And I think when the artists came to Gisborne and to the estate, you know, the backstage area would have a butler for them, and they were well looked after, and they could have anything. And our food was, we had steak and chips, like beautiful steak and chips and poke bowls, and actual food that you wanted to eat, instead of it being like, oh, okay, let's have, you know, burger or
herded like cattle into a field.
exactly. And there was vegan options,
and
and there was vegetarian options. There was everything. So we kind of catered for the crowd that we wanted to get there, and we're sponsored by Moet and Belvedere. So it was just and because it was all the same people in terms of kind of, they wanted the same experience. So they were there buying bottles, magnums, whatever else, and eating nice food. They didn't feel threatened by the next table who would come and swipe the drinks, because everybody had their own situation and they were very happy in their own situation.
Yeah.
And happy to actually have a bit of space and don't come near me and, you know, stay away. So off the back of that, we're then going to kind of create this kind of VIP party feel with the festival edge. Obviously, we're not going to compete with like the big festivals, but we don't need to. We don't want to.
It's a more boutique experience.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sold. Where do I get a ticket? It sounds unreal.
It is good. And actually, all the DJs really loved it, because like when they came, you know, we always looked after them and their friends, and they were actually like, this is a festival that I want to attend, because I don't want to stand in a field with 50,000 people and be crushed to the front. Obviously, everybody does love that, and I'll never ever take away from that. I still go to festivals and stuff, but it's just the niche. It's kind of, and that's where like the nice marry is. It's like I've gone the other way around. I've gone private events and brought that into the festival area, instead of going festival, private events.
And did you even realise you were doing that in the process? Because it's like there's obviously a niche there, but you know,
None at
tested
all.
the market or anything. You just kind of went with gut, intuition, put it on.
Yeah, no, I didn't, and I didn't realise that I was actually doing that. And I think it was more so when I was talking to the tour managers and the DJs, and they're like, this is just the best run festival, because everything was kind of like, hello, nice to meet you, and, you know, like my staff were well presented, and everything just felt kind of organised to them. And obviously that was off the back of me doing multi-million-pound parties, and that's the norm to me. So I think it's been a learning curve. My God.
And it's so tough starting a new brand, but I think starting a new brand in a pandemic, as you said, trust from people in events was just at absolute rock bottom. You get the kind of Fire Festival vibe, and then people had been through so many cancellations and rescheduled. Like, I've still got things I've not even been to yet. I don't even know when they are. Like, I'll just hope I get an email on the week, because I can't keep up with it. But how did you find building, I guess, 2 new brands? And you know, you say you weren't getting up to speed with things like Facebook until later on. So how did you reach people? How did you get it out there?
That was the thing. I think with Gisborne, when it first went, because of the amount of press, I was on BBC twice and then ITV, so everybody read about it, saw about it. So that drove that. But then it kind of plateaued, and that's where Sam then helped me out with the techniques in pushing your sales, which I'd never learnt before, and how you don't always on your Instagram sell, because then your engagement goes down. It has to be kind of like interesting for them to be engaged, and then you drop in the sell. Well,
you've got, because that is the kind of go-to that people revert to. I need to sell loads of tickets. I've booked these amazing DJs. Let's talk about like tickets and the product all the time. But your experience is so unique, and you've got like even you telling me about that now, it sounds amazing. And it's like, you need to tell, it's a balance of like a bit of selling, explaining like what the vibe is, like who you are as an event, why you're here, and then also we've got tickets if you want to come to this amazing thing. But feeding people down that funnel, I think, is so important, rather than just going straight to the hard
exactly.
form.
And I think just taking on board everything that Sam's learnt through Defected. Obviously they are the pioneers in selling.
I'd love to pick his brain if he wants to come on.
Maybe she get him on. He's great fun. And you know, obviously Defected have won some, lost some, but now they're killing it.
And I think in the pandemic
they
shining light.
Sam. So Sam was behind all the streams and everything. So he literally has been like my mentor in being cool in social media world.
Give me his number and give him a call, because they, you know, obviously when events couldn't happen, I think they've you know, it's almost like the a media house now, isn't it? Like they're just so at the heart of that culture, that scene. The content output is ridiculous, and yes, they sell records, yes, they sell events, but that comes last.
Yeah.
Like they are the heart of house music scene across the world. But they're just so relentless with the content and everything to do with that.
Well, they grew.
I
think they grew 1 million followers in lockdown.
Wow,
which is testament to them as a brand, and again pivoting and being the first to kind of be like, right, if you can't go to a club, we'll bring the club to your room. And they were the first to kind of do that. The Defected live streams, I remember watching one of the Defected live streams, and I watched Melee, and I messaged Sam and I was like, I want Melee. I'd never heard of him, I didn't know who he was, and then I got Melee. I got him on my event with in May with Eats Everything.
Oh, amazing.
And so that whole introduction to DJs that they did and everything, that was just incredible to kind of watch from afar and then have Sam's kind of like input.
Yeah.
But with the Estate Festival, the first weekend that we were meant to do, which was in May, it was the wettest May on record, so I couldn't get my trucks in, so we had to make the decision to pull the first weekend. But what I was kind of going back and saying about, if your ticket sales aren't there but your infrastructure still is, we had £1 million infrastructure for that festival because it was 4 weeks. So we lost a weekend, but we were like, we can make this back in the 3. The second weekend was amazing. Third weekend, incredible, sellout. And our final weekend, we had Pete Tong, Frankie Wah and Ariel and Joel Corey booked. And the weekend before, 3 months worth of rain fell in one day, and my whole site was underwater. I was knee deep in water.
Welcome to British Festival.
I know. So had to get a structural stage engineer down to actually measure the safety of the stage, and I was told that if there was continuing gusts over 14 miles an hour, I had to evacuate.
And how do you handle that situation? Because I think
I'm very
you react in those situations.
Calm.
Yeah,
I'm a very calm event manager until you cross me, then you'll see my wrath. But in those situations, I'm very kind of like, I process the information in my head. I might then go behind a building and burst into tears, but I think I've always, and this is something that Johnny Roxburgh actually taught me. It's like, if you are the head and you've got an entire team of people looking up to you to kind of give them the answer and tell them everything's going to be okay, you cannot in that moment wobble.
Yeah.
Because if you wobble, the pot wash wobbles. It trickles so far down to, oh my gosh, something's gonna, and then the whole event you're on a wobbling playing field. So as a director, as a manager, as that top head, where you are seen to kind of be, you've got to take it. And I remember everybody came into my room in because we had like a director's house. My room was like the morning meeting. Everyone would be like in and out, and I just remember my head barman's coming in and was like, Robyn, we've got a problem. And it was about 7 a.m. because they were always up first to get breakfast ready. And I was like, what? And they were like, it's raining hard. I was like, how hard? And they were like, it's not stopping. And I was like, okay. And we all looked at every single weather plan we could, and it was just 100% rain for the whole day. And I put my coat up and my wellies on, and 2 minutes of outside, I was dripping, like drenched. It was like when the heavens opens, and usually it like passes.
Yeah.
It didn't pass for 8 hours. The river burst its banks. My restaurant was underwater. Like everything was just, and this is like a boutique, glamorous festival.
Yeah. That
was just ruined. Everything was ruined. You couldn't get to the main stage. My whole of my VIP and backstage area, you couldn't get. The loos were underwater. The whole teepee of backstage was knee deep in water. Everything just floating around, and it was one of the most gutting feelings because we'd been on a kind of track of, we'd lost the first weekend, which was a massive blow, and then obviously then the second weekend became our first weekend, which is always going to be the quietest weekend to then get your brand up and going. Second weekend, fantastic, and then the final weekend it was a sellout, and then we had to pull it. We had to cancel, and it was so hard to deal with at the time, and I was so upset and so broken because there was nothing that we could have done. Some people said, oh, you could have stayed open, but the whole of the week running up to that weekend was planned for rain. So if there was any more rain, and I would then have had to have evacuated, which I would have then still have had to have paid all the, everything, then a knock-on effect.
Yeah.
So we made the call, then we tried to reschedule it in August, but then the council turned around and said, no, you need 56 days for your EMP to be submitted. And I was like, well, it's 48 and you've already got the EMP. It's a reschedule. No. And so then we were in September, which was, we couldn't compete with festival season at that point.
Coming back at that point, yeah.
So then we launched Halloween. But again, we've just had problem after problem after problem with council and checking of the land just to make sure it doesn't flood again because it's October. So we've just had to kind of drop tools ever so slightly with that one. We've refunded the guests, which again, obviously is quite a hard thing to do when you've had to cancel, you've rolled over the tickets, but then there's no event. So we've had to kind of figure out ways of making it work. And now we're just kind of like resetting and then gonna come back fighting.
Yeah, I think that mindset is so important because I think if you're ever going into festivals, you just need to expect shit is going to happen.
Yeah.
And it's, if you constantly react to the things that happen, you're at the mercy of your environment.
Correct.
But the only thing you can control is how you react to things.
Exactly.
Isn't it?
And I think with this, with the Halloween thing, there was too many things that were not quite right, and it's making that call early enough before getting yourself into an even bigger problem and just being like, right, let's just drop tools, down tools, reset, reconfigure. Where do we want to take this business? What do we want our brand to be? What do we want to be known for? And then let's focus on doing that and doing it well. So that's where we're at the moment with that one.
Okay, amazing. So you are where you are now. I think it'd be good to know what's the end goal when you look at yourself in. I know someone's asked you for your 5-year plan, so I'm going to ask, I don't know, let's say 10, 20-year plan. Where do you want to be?
Well, outside of the festivals, obviously I've got my events, travel and concierge company, which has just gone mental. Everybody wants to party, everybody wants a travel trip, everybody wants to go to a sporting event. So that's been amazing that's kind of gone whoosh. So I think in 5 years, I'd love for kind of, creative hub somewhere in London and in the north, 2 branches, because I do love doing things in the north. I've now got a real great kind of network of people that trust my events that I put on up there, of like-minded people. So, I just envisage this really creative office that is my events and travel and concierge team, along with the festival team, along with Josh's catering team, along with, Sam and a digital agency, that we're all in the same mindset. We're all fighting for each other, we're all supporting each other, we're all feeding each other clients and knowledge and everything, and just doing fucking cool shit, like whether it is £1 million party or
more festivals
or just everything. And that's kind of where I want to, that's my end goal, is to merge this kind of private versus festival versus digital versus everything, and kind of feed each other, because I think the input of the private events industry into the festival industry is a bonus. And equally the resilience of the festival industry, and also like the management of your costs, and knowing, I think the private industry is quite, I think everyone will be quite honest to say that you're pretty frivolous with your costs, because you're just kind of, you go for the best.
Yeah.
But actually taking into account some of the smaller startup companies, spreading the load slightly and just being a bit more cost conscious. That's one of the biggest things I'll take away from the festival industry. So just having something that is everyone's feeding each other, but we're all kind of, end goal is just putting on great parties, great festivals, and having a ball.
Yeah. Do you think you'll do it forever? Do you see yourself as a granny putting events on?
All my family are always like, when are you going to stop? I'm like, I think I get my work ethic from my mum and dad though, because they're such hard workers and they're still working. And I think I tried to sit still for a year and it didn't happen. I put on a bloody festival. So I don't know when it's going to stop, but we'll see.
Oh, wicked. I can't wait to keep watching your journey. One last question.
Yeah.
You've been through some mad challenges and some crazy scenarios, but if you look back, would you change anything at all, or would you keep it as it is?
Do you know what? I'll keep it as it is. I think I have learnt some things the hard way. I think other things I've had incredible opportunities thrown my way. With certain clients that have then opened up doors to like the travel and the luxury side of things. I think one thing I would very, very be way more kind of cautious about is who you go into business with. Because we're, especially in our industry, and especially with the pressure that our industry, especially in the festival industry, I mean, the pressure of that is just another level. You've got to know that your business partners have got your back.
Yeah.
And that might not have been the case in the last year or so.
Yeah.
And that you've got to know that through every high, every low, when we flooded at the estate, it was the three of us, me, Sam and Josh, together, dealing with it and sharing the load of our emotions across each other and protecting each other. And having that will change everything for you. In terms of being sane.
Finger pointing becomes so easy when shit hits the fan, doesn't it?
Exactly.
And it's like it's everyone's problem. It's no one's fault.
It's no one's fault.
Yeah.
And if you're in a kind of working relationship that happens, it's really, really hard to kind of deal with. So that's the only thing that I would change. Everything else, the highs, the lows, the losing of the money, the making of the money, everything, I wouldn't change any of it, because I think if Gisborne had been a huge success financially first time round, I think I would have gone into the next one very jaded.
Yeah.
As like, oh, it's a huge success, everything's fine. When actually I've gone the other way around and actually learned. And I remember actually it was Andy Rayside. We were stood on the stage and he said to me, he was like, fair play to you putting on a festival. Festivals don't make money for the first 3 years. I was like, sorry, what? I was like, did somebody want to tell me that before I launched a festival?
Disclaimer.
Yeah. Damn it. It was really small in the small print. And yeah, so I just think by going through that and like going through the resilience of getting it back, like I wouldn't change it for the world.
Yeah.
My suppliers might say it's different, but
oh, well, thank you so much for coming in.
Absolute pleasure.
Inspiring to listen to your story. I could sit here all day. But yeah, thank you so much for coming in. And we'd love to get you back on, and
definitely
maybe Sam as well.
Yeah, I'll message Sam after this. I'll be like, I think I've got your podcast. He's Irish, so he will talk.
Okay, yeah, we might book this for a few more hours.
Perfect.
Nice one. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.